morning, everybody. How we feeling today? Let's get on our feet and sing together. We're going to sing this song. It's called Won't Stop Now. It's about Ironman athletes. I give you glory for all you've brought me through. And now I'm ready for whatever you want to do. I'm moving forward to follow after you. And now I'm ready for whatever you want to do. Come on, let's sing. Your presence is no Lord. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is no Lord. So come now, Lord, like never before. In every season, your grace has been enough. And I'm believing that the best is yet to come. A cross before me, I hope on things above. And in you, Jesus, the best is yet to come. So your presence is enough, Lord. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is enough, Lord. So come now, Lord, like never before. I need to feel some more energy in here. Let's put our hands together like this, all right? Let's let this next part be our declaration today, okay? Here we go, let's sing. I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. Come on, sing it again. I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. All right, let's hear your voices sing. Come on. Your presence is an open door. We want you, Lord, like never before. Your presence is an open door. So come now, Lord, like never before. Oh. We're not done just yet. We still got a little more singing to do. And I know probably a lot of you here have got a lot of yuck in your lives, because I know that I do as well. And I feel feel like sometimes when you don't know when to take that next step, all you can do is just sing as loud as you can and make that declaration that God has made that promise. He's not going to stop. He's done it before. He'll do it again for you. So let's sing this together and make this declaration, all right? Here we go. Let's hear it. 'Cause I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. Come on. I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. I know a breakthrough is coming. By faith, I see a miracle. My God has made me a promise and it won't stop now. Oh,
Hey, good morning, everybody. God won't stop now. That is incredible. Good morning. I'm Jane.
And I'm DC, and we want to welcome you to Kensington. You know, Kensington Church is a church that was created to make it a safe environment for you to come and explore your faith every week. But right now, we want to talk to you a little bit about something that's a program, one of the missions that Kensington works with. It's a program called Kids Hope. And it's a great program where we go out and mentor young children over at Traverse Heights Elementary. It's 30 to 40 minutes every week over lunch hour. And you just go and spend time with these kids. The young man that I had last year, his name was Noah, a fifth grader. He had waited a year and a half for a mentor. And the first time we met, he came running up to me, introduced me to all of his friends, and said, "This is my mentor, this is my mentor." And really made me feel special. And after that, we just grew a bond, had a great time together. We laughed, we played games, we did crafts together, and most importantly, he reintroduced me to dodgeball, where the item was to get DC out as quickly as they possibly could. But it was a great time, and man, it was just a great experience. Jane, how about you?
I had a second grader named Trinity, and let me tell you, we can't talk about Jesus, but we can show these kids Jesus, and that is exactly what we did. One week she gave me this. It says, "You are a good friend." I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's what Kensington is asking you to do by getting involved with Kids Hope. I know, I almost started crying when she gave me that. A little boy gave it to her on the bus. She had nothing to do with that, so she decided to give it to me. But anyway, I took it, and that's what Kensington is asking you to do. Just get involved, be a friend, and show them Jesus.
She passed it forward and didn't even realize it, so yeah. Well, listen, if you want to find out more about it, if you feel that nudge like we felt when we heard about Kids Hope, you know, Kids Hope is something you don't have to do, you get to do it. So if you want to find out more, contact Brianna.Motley@kensingtonchurch.org. Now, today we're going to finish up our series on The Last One Picked. And of course, during this series, we've been finding out about the last, the least, the lost, and how Jesus took those people, did incredible things with them.
It's an incredible series. You're going to enjoy it. But first, we're going to listen to the band, Brian, Annie, and Mallory. And we want to remind you, if something in the sermon touches you, you can stop out at the hub in the lobby. It's underneath the 3 TVs and the orange graphic. Stop out there. There's some great people you can meet. They can tell you more about the church and direct you on your spiritual walk. But again, we're going to hear some music, and since you're standing up, we have a great question for you.
Don't forget, too, there's also the online version.
Oh, that's
that,
right.
That if you're watching online today, or if you're not comfortable with going out to the desk afterwards, it's okay. You can just go online to this digital platform we created. It's called thehubtc.com. Log on there, and one of our staff will get back to you quickly with any questions that you might have. So,
okay, now we're ready for some music. Yeah, with Brian, Annie, and Mallory. Pretty incredible. But first, we have a question for you.
how many of you wanted to participate in Iron Man competition.
Iron
See,
Man.
I wanted to do that. I got to close
Raise
out
your
the
hand.
ironing board, the iron, and then Jane said, no, that's not what it's
That's
about
not
at all.
it, everybody.
No. So,
Now, we have another question for you. What will you be doing over Labor Day weekend? Thanks for being here.
good morning.
Hey everybody, this is Patrick, and I just wanted to say thanks again for watching our service today online and being a part of this community. Now we know that you might have some questions as you watch the service today and want to find out a little bit more information about who we are. And so we've created an environment for you to do just that. Simply go to startingpoint.today. That's startingpoint.today and fill out that short form, and one of our staff members will reach out to you very shortly and answer any questions that you have about our church and about who we are. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll be back at the end of the service today to give you a little bit more information, but we'll see you here in just a few minutes.
Step out of the shadows, step out of the grave, break into the wild, and don't be afraid. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted. Graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. There is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. There is freedom. So come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. For the Spirit is here, let there be freedom. Let there be freedom. Bring all of your burdens, bring all of your scars. Come back to communion. Come back to the start. Run into wide open spaces, graces waiting for you. Dance like the weight has been lifted. Graces waiting. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. There is freedom. Where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. There is freedom. So come out of the dark, just as you are, into the fullness of His love. For the Spirit is here, let there be freedom. Let there be freedom. You make us free. Oh, your Spirit, it's here now. Chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Lives made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. Oh, chains will fall, prisons shake at the sound of Jesus' name. Hearts made whole, hearts awake at the sound of Jesus' name. Yeah. don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna be afraid. I don't wanna fear the storm just because I hear it. No, I don't wanna fear the storm. I don't wanna fear the storm. Peace, be still, say the word, and I will set my feet upon the sea till I'm dancing in the deep. Oh, peace, be still, you are here, so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. I'm not gonna be afraid, 'cause these waves are only waves. Oh, I'm not gonna be afraid. No, I'm not gonna be afraid. I'm not gonna fear the storm, 'cause you are greater than its roar, yes. I'm not gonna fear the storm. I'm not gonna fear it all. Peace, be still, say the word, and I will set my feet upon the sea till I'm dancing in the deep. Oh, peace, be still, you are here, so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. Peace, yes, over me. Oh, Jesus, oh, we can feel you in this place. Ooh, let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Let this be our prayer. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Let faith rise up, oh heart, believe. Let faith rise up in me. Oh, peace, be still, say the word, and I will set my feet upon the sea till I'm dancing in the deep. Lord, peace, be still, you are here, so it is well. Even when my eyes can't see, I will trust the voice that speaks. Peace, over me, Jesus, yeah,
We've been doing that song for a while now, and I love it, and especially when we get to the bridge, and when it talks about like the oh heart believe, like the internal conversation that sometimes all of us have with ourselves, is trying to like muster up belief, or something difficult happens in our lives, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate it, and you're almost like telling yourself like just have enough faith, or or just believe. And I love this about Christianity. I love this about the New Testament authors, is that that's not like a new emotion to us 2019. Like, that's something that's true of people throughout the course of humanity, where there's these moments that happen in our lives and they cause us just to go, I don't know if, like, in and of myself I believe enough or have enough faith, or I don't know what to do in these moments. And especially when those hard times come, what we find is this anchor point, and the anchor point isn't ourselves, and it's not our striving, and it's not our, like, mustering things up. It's a rest that comes in knowing that God isn't distant. And even when it seems like he's not close, he is still with us through all of those moments. And so throughout the course of this month, you've got to hear story after story of people who have been baptized at our church, and people who's kind of walked, in some ways, difficult roads and found redemption and found all these sorts of things. And so today, you're going to get to hear one of my favorite stories, even that we've heard so far, and it's from my friend named Sean. And Sean experienced a very difficult moment of his life and then found faith in a deep way, a deeper faith through friends and family and through those circumstances. So I'm going to ask you to have a seat. We're going to listen to Sean's story, and then we're going to see Sean get baptized. So let's watch this together.
Hi, my name is Sean Herron, and this is how my story begins. I grew up in a Baptist church in Long Lake area. Growing up in church, I always knew Jesus was real. When I was in 5th grade, my dad got me a black snowboard. I moved to Washington State at 22 and snowboarded 100 days a year, worked at the ski area, and so I lived at the ski area for 3 years. Well, I had gotten all confident in snowboarding. I was all, I'd gotten good at it, and my friends were all going this way. Then I was just going, and the last thing I remember is looking, making this hillside turn, and just looking back, and the sun was coming through at the perfect angle, and that's the last thing I remember until I woke up in the hospital. I would say that it helped me to learn my role and to know that none of us are invincible. I feel like being baptized is the next step in my spiritual journey. What I love about Kensington is every time I come here to Sunday service or render, there's always a message leading towards hope. I'd like to thank my mom, Tammy, my dad, Leonard, my brother, Jesse. I would like to thank them all for always being there for me and being a big reason for my decision to become baptized today.
Come on in. It's a little slippy. It's so awesome to hear your story. Here, why don't you stand this way just so we're not put our backs to everyone. But so a passionate snowboarder had a pretty bad accident. Right. In a lot of ways, it's changed your life. And rather than like running from God, you actually drew closer to God through that. So, it's my pleasure to be able to baptize you. So just to reaffirm, Sean, that you have given your life over to Jesus as your Lord and Savior, and that you want to live with him and for him for the rest of your life. If so, say, yes, I want to live my life for Jesus.
Yes, I want to live my life for Jesus.
That's awesome. All right, here we go.
Sean's an incredible guy. If you haven't got to meet him, make sure after service, I think he'll probably be around, give him a high five. And then his parents, they serve in our K-Kids department as well. In fact, they've kind of been around my son, Henry, so we love you guys so much. It's such an honor to be a part of the day. One more time, can we get up for Sean? Let's get heads up. So great. Love you, bro. It's funny, one of the things I love about our church so much is that if you're new to our church, if it's your first time, you're really amongst a group of people who are asking similar questions, and you've probably asked about your life, about faith, about God, about things that feel beyond you, and you're amongst a group of people who continually ask those questions. Like, none of us are immune to that. But I think so many of us, even in our journey, have just found peace and comfort in knowing that, that what Jesus did for us isn't just like an out there thing, like a one-day thing, just not just an eternity thing, but it's a like now thing. Like Jesus is working in our lives in this very moment. And so if you call Kensington home, if you volunteer here, as we've said this every week, as you give here, all of those things, all these stories that you've heard are made possible just because of people just like you. So we want to say thank you so much for partnering with us with what we do locally and all over the world as well. And I always tell people, if you're new to our church, you're amongst some of the most generous people on the planet. A lot of people just slice off a portion of their income, give to this place. We want to say thank you to all of you who do that. And then throughout this month, too, we've kind of jokingly said, some of you have called Kensington home. You've been attending for several months, or you've been attending for a couple of years, however long it is, and you kind of like almost jumped in, but you're not quite ready to jump in, which I love talking about that. So some of you, if you're not volunteering, but you've been around, and somebody asks you, where do you go to church? And you like accidentally said Kensington, we'd love for you to jump on board fully with us, whether that's in like giving or serving. And so there's a couple ways you can give here. We're going to invite our ushers to move forward. You can give really digitally. That's how most of us give. And you can give through text messaging. So you can just text the word Kensington to 77977. That's one of the easiest ways to give. My mother, who wanted me to correct a few weeks ago, I think I said she was 72. She wanted me to make sure that you knew that she is 71. So now we're clear. Love you, Mom. If my mom, who's 71, can do it, you can do it too. Just text the word Kensington to 77977. You can give in less than 10 seconds on the Kensington app. Also on that app is all of our resources. You can get messages, content, small group material, everything there as well. Or you go to kensingtonchurch.org/giving. That's a great way to be a part of it as well. And you can give all of those things, set up recurring giving in all those ways there as well. And then I got a couple of announcements for you that I want to run by you. The first thing is this. We've got a men's breakfast coming up September 7th. It's at 8:30 a.m. We'd love for you to be a part of this. There's going to be a great speaker that's going to be there, and then a great opportunity for you to come, eat breakfast, meet some guys. If you attend on a weekend, like, I haven't really been able to meet people, and you know, your wife keeps nudging you, you need to make friends at church, or you at least need to get to know somebody at church. It's a great opportunity to do it and have some bacon as well. I know we say breakfast. I genuinely think it's just bacon. I really think that's all we give you. So we'd love for you to be a part of this. It's going to be a lot of fun, so join us for this. And then on the opposite end of the spectrum, we heard like the women kept just getting jealous. You're doing a men's breakfast, but what about me? So ladies, we have a thing for you as well. So Women's Garden Party is coming up September 16th at 7 p.m. We'd love for you to be a part of this. I think this is the first time that we've done this. Is that right? Is this the first time that we've, honest to God, I don't know what a garden party is. But do the ladies know what that is? It involves a garden, and there's food, and there's women. So you should come. It's going to be great. So I will not be there at all, but you should come. It's going to be an amazing event. It's going to be incredible. We'd love for you to join us again, September 16th, 7 p.m. So a lot of you, we'd love for you to be a part of that as well. And then back to school supply drive. You've heard us talk about this throughout the course of the month. So many of you have already brought in supplies, but if you haven't done it yet, we would love for you to do that either today or next week. Make sure you bring those, and we're going to drop those off. This is like book bags or school supplies for kids in our city who need it. And so we'd love for you to maybe come with a book bag full of supplies, and we'll distribute those throughout the city to some kids that need that. And then the last thing I was going to let you know about is today we are wrapping up a series called Last One Picked, and I know every church is a little bit different. The way that we kind of do our messages on a Sunday, it's kind of like a Netflix TV show, which is kind of fun. So we're like at the end of this series. It's kind of like episodes along the way, but we'll get you caught up as we get going today. And this series has been interesting because it really centers around the emotion of what it feels like to like be the last one picked or not be good enough or those kinds of things. And so to get us thinking in that direction, we're going to show you a video about something that's near and dear to my heart. It means a lot to me in life, and I feel like it might to you as well. It's going to involve donuts. So check out this video. Here we go.
Hey.
Can I help you? Do you want something?
I'll take that one.
Like, I'm sure there are worse emotions in the world. I just don't know many of them that top, like, finding, like, out that they don't have any good donuts left. Anybody else? Am I right? How many donut people do we have out in the audience real quick? How many of you are like, you're genuinely a fan? How many of you, let's be really honest, how many of you have gone to Great Wolf Lodge just to get a Dunkin' Donut? Anybody done that other than me? Yeah. You're not going to the lodge. You're literally just going to get a 12-pack? That's not it. That's not how you would say that, is it? Nope, dozen, because we say dozen rather than 12-pack when we get donuts. And I don't think they sell that at the Great Wolf Lodge. I don't know. See somebody coming down the side. That's a whole different talk. Anyway, but yeah, it's amazing. Like, we just love it. And then you've seen this before. There's all these emotions about, like, the last one picked, especially if you get a donut, you kind of laugh. You're like, well, there's no way I want that. And then I'm always tempted to ask for a discount for the last one that looks terrible. And you can't really do that because you saw how angry the person at the counter was. You're not going to do that. Like, it's just a weird feeling, like being the last one picked or picking the last thing as well. And we've said this throughout the series that for many of us, like, last one picked is an emotion that you felt as a kid. Right? Like, it was a dodgeball game or there was a kickball game and, everybody else got picked but you, and you were like the last person, and, it was between you and somebody else, and, there's always that awkward moment where they get picked and then it's just kind of silent, and then somebody makes a weird joke, and then eventually you get on the team. And then for me, what was fun is, I think I shared this a few weeks ago, we did office chair basketball at our church, at our staff meeting, and I was the last one picked. So right before the series, I got to experience what that was like, and it was devastating. It was devastating. And you just feel like, oh, it's just a terrible thing. And then the older that you get, this is even more fun, the older that you get, it's different because it's probably not dodgeball, or if it is dodgeball, it doesn't bother you as much. But for some of you, it's like a promotion. Like, you watch somebody else and they get promoted and they, be promoted over you, and you feel like you should have been promoted because you have all the skill sets and the talent, the experience, and you just find like everybody else seems to get what you deserve, and you're the last one picked for whatever that is, and that's hard. And as an adults, we don't talk about this either, and this is kind of hard. Maybe you talk about it with your spouse, maybe you don't, but even in like friend groups or relational groups as well, like you'll see this, like you might be the one person that gets left out of the text, or you're the one person that gets kind of left out of the group thread, and it just feels awkward. You don't want to say anything, and then you're good at like making a sarcastic joke to make it feel better, but at the end of the day, like, you still feel bad, right? Like, you just feel this emotion over being the last one picked. And then for some of us, and we'll jump into the talk, for some of us, it happens in our family, right? Like, how many of you have siblings? You have brothers and sisters? Yeah, okay, so you know this. I'm an only child, so I don't really get this. But I would say, like, I hear people all the time that there's, a couple siblings, 2 or 3, and you know which ones are the favorite, right, in your family? Like, I hear this all the time. Like, you would never ask it, or your parents would probably never even say it out loud, but sometimes you grew up and you felt like you were the least favorite kid that your dad, like, man, your dad liked you and he loved you, but, he really liked the other 2, right? Or you'll hear people brag about their kids every once in a while, and 2 of the siblings, like, well, here's this and here's this. I was at a wedding this past weekend, and this happened. I was talking to a random guy that was there, and he told me about 2 of the 3 kids, and then I had to ask about the 3rd one. And you're like, well, I would never do that. And I'm like, nah, that happens a lot, right? Like, you just, that was a great voice. Like, you feel it, right? You feel it in those moments. Now, today what we're going to do is we're going to launch from that. We're going to be talking about a few things specifically around that. But part of the reason that many of us are last one picked is because we messed up the first time. You ever seen this? Even when you were a kid, like if you weren't good the first time you played basketball on the team, like it was weird for you to get picked the next time. Or if you're in a friend group and you say something really weird or awkward and you didn't even mean it, you didn't mean it to come out that way, it seems like you didn't get invited back. And what we all crave in those moments for ourselves is like a second chance, right? Like, there's something in you that just says, hey, look, oh, shoot, I messed that up, but that's not who I am, right? We ever caught ourselves saying that? Like, you don't get it. Look, I'm so sorry. I'm usually not this awkward. I say that on a daily basis, like, I'm usually not this weird. I'm sorry about that. And we all crave this second chance. Now, what's interesting for many of us, and again, you wouldn't say this out loud, but you're in church, so you can't lie for the next few minutes, right? The thing that's interesting for us is we crave second chances and third chances and 26 chances, but for the people that mess up around us, we're not always so gracious to them, especially if we don't have a relationship already, right? Now here, let me prove that, right? How many of you are dads in the room who have a girl? Your dads of young girls, right? So you get this. If a guy wants to take out your daughter, How many chances does he get to make a good first impression? Maybe one. Maybe one, right? If he messes up that first one, the second interaction is going to be you and your friend, Mr. Shotgun. You just want him to feel the weight of that. You don't get multiple chances to make a great impression on your father-in-law, right? When it comes to friend groups, you know this too. And I don't understand women. We've established that multiple times over the last several years. But I would say, like, women, you get this. Sometimes they don't even have to talk. Like, a woman walks in, and it's like a quick size up. I don't know how they do that. And it's like, maybe you get a chance, and then if it doesn't go well the very first time, the second chance might come or it might not. With other people, we're not as, like, gracious with our chances, but we all crave a second chance. Now, today, we're going to talk about this in the text for a few minutes, but I wanted to establish two principles that I think are true, and so I'm going to give you, like, kind of the ending of this ahead of time, and then I want to spend a lot of time talking about these two things, because I think they're true of what we crave in our lives, but they're not necessarily something that we give out. And then for many of us, and this is what we're going to spend the bulk of our time talking about, for many of us, we don't assume that God does these two things naturally for us, right? And so here's the thing that we've said, right? Here's where we're going to launch from. Our past mistakes never nullify God's present invitation to follow him, right? Now, you may believe this in your head, and if you grew up in church, you've probably heard people say versions of this, right? That God's going to love you no matter what. There's nothing you could do to make God love you any more or any less, those kind of statements. And that's all well and good until you really mess things up in your life. And there's a part of you that goes, look, if God really loves me, that's great, and maybe that sort of thing, but you equate God's love to maybe like a parent's love that felt conditional or a friend's love that felt conditional. And you don't feel like you get like second, third, fourth, fifth chances with God. And sometimes it feels like, and you probably wouldn't say this out loud, it feels like that if there's a God up there, and if he's good, and you are not, and you mess things up, then whatever that invitation into a relationship is, or the followership is, right, feels like it's removed. And the second one is this, and this goes a little bit deeper, and again, we don't talk about this one as much. But past mistakes never nullify God's present invitation to be used by him. And this is where I think it really hits home, right? For those of you who are followers of Jesus, and I've talked to people all the time like this, you don't say it like this. You don't say it out loud like this. You just back away from anything that feels like a calling. And we've talked about this over the last couple of weeks. You just back into what feels comfortable, even if you're successful and even if you're talented. You just back into what feels good, but that you can control. And so today what I want to do for the next little bit is I want to talk about your past. I want to talk about how we navigate our past, our present, and our hopes for the future. And we're going to do it by talking about somebody that everybody loves, even in 2019. We're going to talk about tax collectors, right? Everybody loves taxes. Who doesn't love taxes? Who doesn't do your tax? Don't answer that. Anyway, so you got tax collectors, and tax collectors in our day and time, they're kind of distant. Like you do it online, you do it, somebody else does your stuff for you. You don't think about tax collectors in 2019 the way that it was approached back in the area of the world that we're going to be reading about today. But tax collectors were interesting, and the tax collector that we're going to be looking at today is a guy named Matthew. And Matthew was fascinating because he was extraordinarily intelligent, right? Extraordinarily intelligent. He didn't have an iPhone to do the calculations. He was, let me go through the list, right? Tax collectors in this time oftentimes were multilingual, and part of the reason was that in a specific area of the world, there were so many different people groups and types of people that would be coming in that if you're going to collect taxes from somebody, you likely didn't have an interpreter sitting next to you. You had to be able to talk to many different people groups at the same time. They had to have the ability, and this was not me at all, to manage complex math conversions, right? Adding is about where I get. Subtraction every once in a while, multiplication, nope. And they had to be able to do all of these math conversions, in real time without this sort of calculator that you use. They didn't have a TI-83. They didn't have any of that. Like they're just doing it. So Matthew was able to do these things on the fly. And then the fun part that nobody really ever talks about is you had to be charismatic to be able to influence people. And the reason that this was true is that oftentimes tax collectors, they would not only receive money for the taxes, but then they would pay themselves on top of that. So they're taking more money than the actual taxes were worth, and then they could inflate however much that dollar amount is, in a lot of cases by however much they wanted to inflate that. And so they had to be charismatic enough to convince you to not only pay your taxes, but to pay them. which is so interesting, right? They kind of had to be a salesperson. They also had to have a knowledge of geography and topography, right? They had to know everything kind of going around without Apple Maps or Waze. They had to be able to do that. And then my favorite part, and again, nobody ever talks about this in church, but they had to be appropriately manipulative, right? And they had to be appropriately manipulative because they, in some ways, it was business. How can I get you to pay your taxes and then also skim some of that off for me and convince you to do it? So tax collectors were brilliant. In a lot of ways, they were fearless. They were very hated in the ancient world a lot of times. And their commitment was like to this survival mentality of how do I make this happen, for myself? Now, what was interesting is that when it comes to these tax collectors, a lot of them chose this profession. And they knew, and I don't miss this, they knew because they would have grown up around it, they knew that choosing this would often isolate them from other people. And it would be in some ways like a way to ostracize themselves from other people. You don't wake up, you don't wake up in the morning, right, hoping to just give somebody else money and then just want to be relationally their best friend, right? It just doesn't happen, especially if you feel like you're being manipulated. So we can say this, and this is what we're talking about with Matthew. Matthew, right? Matthew's decision to be a tax collector rendered him unlikely for a relational second chance with anybody. Which means that once you severed that, I don't miss this, once you severed that relationship, it's really hard to get that back with people in this way. So if you choose tax collector, that's a completely different thing, right? Let me put these up. We're going to show you like a difference. There's the tax collector. What Matthew ends up becoming, and it's going to feel weird if you've never heard this language around it before, what Matthew ends up becoming is not just a tax collector. He ends up becoming a disciple of a rabbi. Now, this is interesting, and the reason we phrase it this way is because back in this time period, and the rabbi that he essentially becomes associated with, that rabbi hadn't died and risen from the grave yet. So in a lot of ways, people just assumed he was a rabbi. Now, he was doing extremely cool things and teaching things that was messing with people's heads, but he essentially calls 12 of these disciples to follow him, Matthew being one of them. But he calls people that seem like they were completely unqualified, whose past didn't at all lend themselves to following a rabbi in this way. So let me tell you, this is what it would take to be a disciple of a rabbi, right? Typically what they would do is they would memorize the entire Hebrew Bible as a kid. Like as a small child, most of these Jewish boys were brought up to be able to see who could be the best of the best in terms of being able to follow a rabbi. So they would memorize oftentimes the entire Hebrew Bible. I love this. They would memorize not just that, interpretations of famous rabbis. So they wouldn't just memorize the text. Then they would be memorizing and studying what other famous rabbis had said about the text. And then they would be quizzed on that throughout their young life, that sort of thing. It was typically about a 25-year journey of discipleship to really become someone who's a disciple of a rabbi. Now, look at this, and this is one of my favorite parts. And then there was this expectation to essentially be covered in the dust of a rabbi. Ray Vander Laan has incredible work on this. If you haven't read it, it's so good. But this idea of being covered in the dust of the rabbi would mean that you would pick a rabbi and follow so closely to that rabbi that the imagery was as they would walk, there would be, dust kicked up on their shoes. And the image is from that dust that you're following so closely behind someone else. All of this was kind of like making it into this Jewish NBA, right? That's your odds of becoming one of these disciples of a famous rabbi at the time. And then we find Jesus entering the scene as this incredible rabbi, this incredible teacher. The people that he picks are people like Matthew, people that nobody quite expected to be one of these people. And the other part of this is that Matthew, even though he chose at some point along the way to do what he's doing, it also means that he was likely not chosen or good enough to be one of these people. And yet Jesus, no matter what he is good enough or not good enough in, calls him out to do something extraordinary. So that's the context we're going to pick up in today. We're going to be looking at Luke, I believe, chapter 5. Here's what it says. It says, after this, Jesus went out, and he sees a tax collector by the name of Levi, which is Matthew, right? He'll be called Levi throughout, but his name is Matthew. Levi sitting at his tax booth. Now, this is an incredible thing that I want you to visualize as much as possible. How many of you ever did a lemonade stand as a kid? Anybody? You remember a lemonade stand? You've built these for your kids. Let's just imagine that for a second. It's an adult lemonade stand. The only difference is he's stealing your money, which is a lot like your kids with lemonade stands. It's perfect. So Yep. So he's sitting at this stand. People are coming. Essentially, they would come in. They would know what they're going to do. And Jesus is walking straight out of this scenario where he heals somebody and is a part of this miraculous thing. And he's already frustrating the religious elite. And he essentially does something that frustrates the religious elite, and he's about to do something that's going to frustrate them even more because they don't understand what he's doing. So he walks out of this beautiful scenario, and he walks up to this tax booth lemonade stand place, and he says, look, Levi, Matthew, he says this, follow me. Follow me. Now, what's like between all these lines that we don't see is when a famous rabbi walks up and says, follow me. It's a big deal. This is an emotional moment for him to call Matthew out of what he's currently doing, being ostracized, tax collector. And it says Matthew got up, Levi got up, left everything, and followed him. Now, I was trying to figure out what this would be equated to. Now, you probably don't feel this as much, but how many of you played wiffle ball as a kid? Anybody play wiffle ball when you were a kid? Anybody? Yeah. How many of you play wiffle ball as an adult like me? Anybody else? Yeah, I would do that all day long. I have a bat that I taped up. This has nothing to do with the talk. And it like Wonder Boy from The Natural. Do you remember this? Anyway? Great, just me. We'll talk about that later. Anyway, I love wiffle ball. But this is kind of like equating like you're playing wiffle ball maybe, and then somebody comes up and is like, hey, you're going to come with me to do the real thing. You're going to the majors. I'm calling you out to do something completely different than what you're doing now, and it's something that you desperately always wanted. Now, for Matthew, this is emotional. For the religious elite looking at this moment, it's also emotional in a very different way. They're watching Jesus pick people to follow him that should not be following him in this way. In fact, we say it this way. Jesus invites the least likely, hated, rejected, dismissed, and unclean in Jewish society to follow him and be one of these disciples. To which all the religious leaders kind of You ever seen this? Even if they don't say anything, their arms are kind of crossed. They just kind of look at you down a little bit. That's what I picture. A bunch of angry older men just doing this, Matthew did not deserve, and he didn't qualify, and he wasn't ready for it. And Jesus calls him to do this anyway. Well, the power of the narrative comes a few verses later, but right here in this emotional moment, when Jesus calls him and says, follow me, Matthew definitively breaks from his past of being a tax collector to choose this continual following of Jesus. Some of you know this, but the New Testament wasn't written in English originally, right? It was written in Greek. And the words around this are this almost like you're not just choosing one time to go. The words around this paint this picture of this he chooses and he continues to choose to follow this rabbi. Now, the part that I think is interesting, because I tend to be the religious elite person, that doesn't make sense, that's not logical, you should not do that. The internal question that they were really wrestling down, the tax collector and a thief, was who are the real objects of God's divine mercy? Now, let us think of it for a second. Who is the real object of someone who should be and could be forgiven by God? Because most of the religious elites, they were rule followers. They kept things in the ways that they should be kept. And then Jesus picked somebody who wasn't doing that in the ways that they thought they should. Now here's what I'm going to poke at for you. You ready? Most of us, even if we didn't say it out loud, have a person or a category of people that we don't believe should experience the blessings of God. Most of it. Now you wouldn't say that out loud. But there is a category of person or persons or people or in-laws or distant family members or crazy uncles or that one coach that deep down you don't think should receive the blessings and or mercy of God. It's you don't want them to go to hell. You just want them to be a little bit miserable on earth, right? Which is what the religious leaders are kind of standing around going, but he chose that. But he chose to be the tax collector. He chose to steal and manipulate and to be charismatic and do these things. And Jesus steps into that. What happens next is even more fun for the religious elite. It says this. It says, then Levi, or Matthew, held a great banquet for Jesus at his house, and a large crowd of tax collectors and others were eating with them. Now, there's so much humor in this, and the way that Luke writes it is so funny because he's going, not only are the religious elite going to be a little bit frustrated around all this, and not only were they already going to be a little bit frustrated, but then Matthew goes, look, I'm leaving and I'm going to follow you and I'm going to be a disciple. And not only that, here's all my other sinner friends. Let's have a party. And Jesus is like, score. Let's go. And they go have the party. Matthew chooses a completely new direction with his life, but Jesus enters into the space that was his old direction. He enters into the space that was even more of the people that were undeserving of the presence of a holy God. And he walks in, and then finally, like, this is where it's too much. Now, I don't know what all was happening at this party. It's probably one of those parties. The religious elite are part of it, and watch their response. I love this. But the Pharisees and the teachers of the law who belonged to their sect, they complained to his disciples. They didn't complain to Jesus, because Jesus continually made them look dumb. They didn't do that. They went to the other disciples and complained. It says, why do you eat and drink, and can we say this together, with and? Oh, that's good. It feels good to say it out loud, right? Why do you eat with tax collectors and sinners? Now, I love the implication. Why would you allow God's mercy, and not just mercy, but grace, and not just grace, but like blessing, and not just blessing, but like presence, love, support, and good things happen amongst all those sinners, amongst all those people that hurt you, amongst all the people that have wronged you, amongst all of the people who weren't deserving of grace? And it's almost like Jesus overhears them. And I don't know how he overhears them. I don't know who exactly was talking. Or maybe just Jesus, like, Jedi knew. I don't know. Thank you. He says this. He says, it's not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Right? Don't miss that. I didn't come for all of you that seem to have it all together, even though you're not happy. It's not the healthy than the doctor, it's the sick. Where else would you have me, is essentially what he's saying. I have not come to call the righteous, but the sinners to repentance. Which is what we talked about last week. I've entered into this world with Matthew because Matthew in some ways is moving in this direction, and all these other sinners that are Matthew's friends, they're moving in this direction, And I came that they would pause and turn the other direction and be so curious by this scandal of love and grace that they would begin to move towards God rather than away. Now, I love this, and here's why I love this. Because Matthew's past could have disqualified him from this experience altogether. In fact, for this religious group of people, that's what they felt like probably should happen. They weren't hardly at all concerned that Matthew was moving this way. And if he was to pause and move around, I don't miss this, there would have been a limit to the blessing and grace that he would have likely received. And here's what's so hard for you and for me, ready? There are likely people in our lives that there is a limit to the blessing of grace that we kind of hope that they receive. And here's the even harder part, are you ready? And this is true of me, it's true of you, I think it's true of all of us. That there are people in our lives who we've messed things up to the point, and we've hurt people, whether you did it intentionally or unintentionally. You've done things to people that would look at you and go, there probably should be a limit to the grace and mercy and blessing that I would extend, that I expected to be extended. And then the harder one, and this is the really honest one, you ready? For many of us in the room, and we've said this throughout the series, your past and your baggage and your limitation and your brokenness is so real and so full in your eyes that sometimes you look at you and go, I feel like I'm moving this way, away from God because there is a limit to what I deserve and what I should get and the blessing from God that I should receive. Why? Because you know what you did. And you know who you hurt. And you know that you enjoyed it when you did it. And you know that right now there are things that you're doing that deep down you wish you weren't doing. But you're doing them. And you did it on the way over this morning. You picked a fight with your spouse because you could. You did. I didn't. You did. And the power of Jesus calling these disciples who didn't deserve it is that he's getting after their past was one thing, but I am calling out through grace and love and undeserved mercy a different future. What's true about you is this, that your past is a predictor of your future if something doesn't change in your present. And what changes in your present, like whenever that present is, whether that's now or 3 months from now or a year from now or 2 years from now or 10 years from now, is what has to change in your present isn't you being better or more good or figuring out how to strive harder. It's you coming and saying, I've hit the wall on what I can force to happen on my own. Open-handedly, I'm coming to you. The beauty of Christianity, the beauty of Jesus is like, you're not disqualified because of your past, that you're not done because of your past. You're not done because of your present. You're not done because of those things. Look, come to me open-handed and I will call out in you what I put in you. But in our minds and in our hearts, we have to get past like what we've done. And we have to get past like some of the pain that we've caused and the brokenness and the failures and the insecurities and the things that you already know that you've set into motion. Put in my notes, I said this way, that my past, and this is me, and I feel like it's most of us, my past will inform, but it will not define. That what you've done in the past, it will inform your present and your future. And you get to choose whether it defines you or not, but it doesn't have to. And it doesn't have to not because of you being good enough or figuring it out, it doesn't have to because of Jesus. That what you did in the past was these broken things and this pain and all this. But Jesus goes, look, I've come to make that whole again. And not whole again in the sense of like it didn't happen, but whole again in the sense that I'm taking all those broken pieces and I'm making something new, and not only new, but usable, and something that's filled with mission and purpose. And then you go with all of that as this new creation into the world. But you kind of have to decide, like, I'm not going to allow my past to define my present or my future. That was my past. It will inform my decision making. It will inform what I've done. It will inform where I'm headed. But it will not define me, because as a follower of Jesus, I am new. Second thing is, like, my future is built one choice of direction at a time. Don't miss this. That you being a part of this, like, building of your future means that there are moments, and there's all these moments in our lives, in thousands of categories, where we either choose to move away from God or pause and choose to move towards God. And in those areas, come on, especially those of us who are followers of Jesus, if we're really honest in the room, there are certain areas that feel easier to us than others to move in the direction of God, and others that we move completely in the other direction. And Jesus is saying, I want all of it. I want all of those spaces that you're moving in the opposite direction. I want you to follow me with your whole heart, mind, body, soul, and spirit. And you get to be a part of building this future and say, I'm going to choose to follow you open-handedly with my whole life and move in the direction that you called me to move in. And the beauty of the present moment, and we'll wrap up in a second, is this: that the decision to affirm or reaffirm a direction is presently mine right now. Like right now, you will choose which direction you're going to move in. And then a minute later, you will choose which direction you're going to move in. And then 6 months from now, you're going to choose which direction you're going to move in. Which means like you can go, I'm gonna love my wife really, really well. I'm gonna do so great at this. And you make that decision now. And then something happens and they do that and you're like, you know what, now I'm going to choose it all over again. Ladies, let's talk about it like this. I'm gonna choose to love my husband selflessly, be full of grace, and then later on he forgets to take out the trash. And I'm going to choose now grace. And an hour later when he still hasn't done it, I'm gonna choose now grace and love. Forgiveness, it's the same thing. I've been hurt by this person and I may be hurt again. And I'm gonna figure out what boundaries to set in place that are healthy. But if they hurt me again, I choose grace, and then they hurt you. And something happens and you go, you know what? I choose forgiveness. How many times do I choose forgiveness, Jesus? Again. And I guess it's infinite. I'm gonna fall in a second, but we're doing good. If you were here last week, you know that that's possible. There's a GIF, promise. Was that at 9 or 11? You remember? Was it 9? Yeah, of course it was. Great. And you get to pick what those categories are. And Jesus is inviting you to say, hey, I want all of it. I want you to trust me with all of it. So today, here's the statements that I really want us to hopefully grapple with and lean into, and that's this. That there's no place that you've been to that nullifies what God might do, right? There's nothing that you've done, no place that you've been to in your life that nullifies what God will do in and through you. And the second one is this: when it seems impossible with you, it's never impossible with God. Our brokenness never has the final say. And honestly, if I could convince every person that's a follower of Jesus that this were true to the point where they would apply it, what you would do with your life would be so incredibly extraordinary. And what the local church would do would be so incredibly extraordinary. So to wrap up our time, I'm going to do one thing that we haven't done before, at least I haven't done here. We're going to talk about 3 categories that at least I've seen this in. And honestly, for those of us who kind of wrestle with our past in a couple of areas, I want to talk about 3. These aren't the only 3. In fact, there's as many categories as there are people who think about categories. But being a pastor, part of what I do is I meet with people all the time, and I meet with people a lot of times that are at the point of their brokenness or admitting their brokenness and working through it. And I want to talk about these 3 in particular, and they're a little bit controversial. Is that okay? Can we? 9 o'clock's fun. You're the fun crowd, right? So this is going to be great. You're going to get the email greg.ruby@kensingtonchurch.org if you're mad. I'm kidding. Now you know my email too. All right, so here's the patterns of regret that I want to talk about. And the first one's probably more controversial. Well, we'll just see how it goes. The first one I want to talk about is this, right? I want to talk about alcohol for a second. Can we do this? This is fun, right? So I grew up in the South, and I get these questions all the time, and I don't drink. So a caveat to me, I don't drink. And I don't drink because I think it's a sin. Right? That's not it at all. In fact, a lot of people assume that, so they'll offer me a beer, and I'll say, no, I'm good. I'll just take some sweet tea, and then they laugh, and then we settle together on Coke, because the North. But this happens to me all the time, and I love talking about this. I love talking about it. And then I almost always get asked the question, well, why? If they're really brave, and they get past it, they're like, well, why don't you drink? And this is one of my favorite things. And I love talking about it because I don't think it's a sin. I really don't. But with that said, I grew up in the context where people thought it was a sin to the point that they would twist scripture to mean something that it didn't. So I grew up with people that would teach the Bible and say, when Jesus turned water into wine, it wasn't really wine, it was just grape juice. I'm like, well then why didn't they call it, wait for it, grape juice? I don't know. Isn't the alcohol part of that? And not only that, I'm like, if Jesus made it wine, I bet it was good. I don't think it was not great. I bet it was good. I don't think it's a sin. Now watch me for a second. At the same time, like anything else that you consume, we can have the same conversation about Instagram. We can have the same conversation about Wendy's, which we will in a second. We can have all these conversations. When it comes to alcohol, and I don't miss this, I meet people all the time whose connection to alcohol in their past has caused regret. And at some point along the way, that regret has progressed. But the thing that did not stop was the common denominator in the spaces where their regret occurred, which was alcohol. And this isn't all of you. This isn't everybody. It's not. It's not online people who are now like, I better drink quick. Like, it's not that. But here's what I'm saying. I don't want you to miss this. But if in your past, alcohol has been connected to regret, it's not sin or not sin to me. It's like it feels extraordinarily unwise to bring that common denominator into your present and your future, right? Now, this is just me, and I'm just, come on. Because if we're really honest, right? If we're really honest, some of you have addictive behaviors, and you have addictive behaviors in certain things. It's not everything. You have addictive behaviors in certain things. My addictive behavior, I've never really drank alcohol. So far, it's not connected to this. But I have addictive behaviors in other areas. And I know that if I don't avoid those or remove those, it will cause regret in my future. Now, here's the thing for me. With people who have, regret connected to alcohol in their past, and I'll miss this for a second. Those people never sit in my office and begin a story with, you know what? And then we drank too much, and it went great. It just doesn't happen. Those stories do not exist in my office, which means this for me, and this is for you, which means that if you use this as a way to slightly escape, there will be a day where you use it to extraordinarily escape. Which means that if you use this so that you can have whatever with the life of the party, whatever. If you use this to change you, there will be a day that it changes you beyond the way that you want to be changed. And all I'm saying to you is this, right? When it comes to your regret, it's not the whole debate about is it a sin, is it not a sin, I don't, whatever. The question that I have is like for you, if you were going to sit with your kids at 70, 80, 90 years old, and they were going to look at you and ask you this question, ready? Ask you the question. Was it wise, not for everybody to drink, but was it wise for you to drink? I would be curious what you would say to them based off of your past experience with it. And this is not everybody, but it is some of you. And so here's what I'm going to tell you, and this is incredibly emotional, and I don't understand it because I've never really experienced any addiction to it. I know so many people who have. Here's what I tell you. If there's a part of you that feels like you flirt with it or you're anywhere near the line, you need to here's what I tell you. You need to pause now. If you have kids, if you're married, and this is just because the story's out here, if that's you, pause now and have conversations with people who can walk you through it. Because I'll tell you this, and this is just me. The thing that I hope for you, and it's not judgmental. It probably feels judgmental, especially because I don't drink. I get that. It's not judgmental for me at all. But part of me in wanting something for you is that you don't have to experience regret that you weren't designed to handle anyway, right? So that's the alcohol one. Are we warmed up now? Great. Here's the next one. It's about finances, right? This is hard. I didn't grow up around, I didn't grow up knowing a lot of this. This is hard and this is personal for us, right? I'll say when it comes to your finances, if in your past you have a track record of really messing this up, this is hard. One of the best things that you could ever do for your family, for your kids, your future family, your future kids, is to go, I'm not good at this, right? And if you're not good at this, let me tell you what you're really robbing yourself of. It's not a new car. It's not a Tesla. I mean, you are, but, it's probably not. You're robbing yourself of the opportunity to feel what it's like to meet the needs of other people with radical generosity. And if you don't solve that, and hear me, this is hard. There have been seasons of our lives where we've just not been great at this, and that's been the robbed part of it. It's not just robbing your family. It's you're robbing your entire opportunity for someone to go, I have this need, and you go, I'm going to meet that need now. That's what you're robbing yourself of. And here's the thing. I think when God calls us to be so good with this, it's not just so that you can have more stuff. I don't think God's up there going, I hope you have the iPhone 11. I mean, if you want to help me with that, that's great. I would love the iPhone 11. That's part of my problem. You know what I mean? But I would say to you, what you're robbing yourself of is freedom from experiencing true and authentic generosity in your life. And that's what God calls us to. And so my question for you, and this is a very personal thing for you, but if you have not been good at this in your past, the expectation that you will be good at it in your future without someone coming alongside of you is very unlikely. So will you come to God with all of your financial resources and say, God, here I am open-handed. My past has been that, but that will not label my future. I'm choosing a new direction with it. And the last thing I'll say about this is if you're single, ready? and there's any part of the voice in the back of your head that goes, I'm going to marry rich, right? Or I'm going to marry somebody who's better at it, or I'm going to, whatever you fill in the blank with, it just doesn't work that way. I mean, they have to be stupid rich, right? And then they have to be willing to fix your problems with it. Ding. Okay, last one. Health. This is mine. I mean, there are others, but like this is mine, right? Health is an interesting one because when it comes to this and your past and your present and your future, you don't feel the effects of this until it matters. You just don't. I don't. So I joke about Wendy's all the time, Chick-fil-A all the time, but they're healthy. We're good. But like, so here's what I say to you. Ready? I don't care how old you are or where you are on this. When you decide to neglect your health, you are abdicating your responsibility in the future to the person who loves you most and is willing to take care of you. That's what you're doing. Ignoring my health now as a 30-something, 32, 31, how old am I? 31. 30, and I'm smart. 31, right? 31-year-old person means we know Emily's going to live longer than me. I mean, we all get that. But it means I'm saying to her, if I ignore this now, I'm taking my hands off of my responsibility later. We're good enough at keeping people alive while they're sick, right? Come on, right? Which means that when it comes to my health, the more that I ignore my responsibility on this, the more I'm looking at whoever, and this is for you, whoever loves you the most and saying, I love you, I'm so thankful for you, and I will be your responsibility when my poor decision-making throughout the course of however much my life is. Connect with that. Now, there's genetics, and if you're a doctor, I get it. There's components to it. But when it comes to eating and exercise and all these kinds of things, that's what you're doing. So my question to you is your past doesn't have to define you anymore. You don't have to be that person anymore. And I don't even think in the present you have to make such a drastic change where everything happens all at once. But here's what I am saying to you, is what, in this particular area, is the one or two decisions that you need to make right now to lead you on a path towards wholeness in this area that Jesus wants for you anyway, right? So I'll tell you what mine is. This is really open and honest. Can I just be really blunt? Like, don't judge me too much. Scott, my doctor's not here. His wife is, but you can't tell him, right? So this is what it means for you. This is super practical. You ready? I've said, I'm not eating 3 healthy meals a day. I wish I was. I am trying to eat 1 healthy meal. That's how bad I am at it. 1 healthy meal a day. And I'm trying to exercise 3 times a week. And you know what my exercise is? It's not CrossFit. I love, I watch CrossFit posts. And I'm jealous. I'm like, if I try to do a pull-up, you would laugh, I would laugh, and then it would be on Instagram. It would be bad. But I'm trying to walk roughly about an hour a day, which is awkward for our staff because that means I'm inviting them to walk with me for their meetings, And then they're faster than me, and I have to keep it. It's great. But here's what I'd say. That is 1 small decision now for me that I'm not great at, but I want to get better at. My question is what is that for you? What is that path from I was going this way, I'm going to pause, and I'm going to follow what Jesus has for my life? There are so many of these categories, it's unbelievable. But if you fall into any one of these 3 or have your own, it's time that I think you need to make a change because that change will help you become the person that God's calling you to be in the future. But it starts with a present decision right now. So here's the 2 questions that we're going to end. Questions are this. What current direction have you embraced that is leading you to an undesired place? Or that will lead you to an undesired place? That you're flirting with it, but if you continue to move in that direction, or if you fall one way or the other, you know that place that you're headed to is an undesired place. And the second question is this. What current source of regret do you need to let go of? What have you done in the past that you've allowed to define your present and your future? And you just need to go, that was me, that will inform me in the future, but that's not me moving forward. Because I think God takes all of us and our brokenness and moves us forward to where he's called us to go. So here's what we're going to do to end our time together today, and it'll be interesting. Usually we try to end with a song and kind of wrap it up, and do that. I don't want to do that today, if that's all right. What I want to do with you is I want to leave you hanging here. So I don't think you need inspiration around this as much as you need to go, it's just time to make a change, right? So I want to put this back up here, and I'm going to ask you something a little bit odd, and then I'm going to pray for you, and then we're going to wrap up. If you have your cell phone, I'd love for you to pull out your cell phone if you would, just for a second. And then I'm going to ask you, if you would, to take a picture of this just as a reminder. I'll get out of it so we don't break your cameras or anything like that. We don't mess anything up. But I want you to take a picture of this, and then I'm going to ask you to do something with that picture if you have your iPhone or whatever. Some of you are note takers. If you do that, that's great too. But I want to take a picture. Go ahead and take a picture of it right now. Get up there. It's a real big screen. It's like 70 inches, you know. So you're like, why don't we show sports on there? It's a great question. Oh, see, now it's a bigger screen. That's more than 70 inches. That's great. All right, get your pictures. I want you to take that picture, right? And what I want you to do is I want you to take that picture, and some of you know how to do this. Hopefully you know how to do this. I'd love you to take it, and I want you to send it to somebody right now. I want you to take that picture. It's a spouse. It's a friend. It's a coworker. It's somebody that you trust enough to have another conversation with. And here's what I want you to do. I want you to send them that picture and say, hey, I need to talk about this week. And I want you to figure out what your categories are. You're like, that's uber practical. It is so practical because all of this is practical, right? So I want you to do that. I want you to send it to somebody right now. Like, hey, and some of you are sitting next to your spouse. You need to send it to each other. It's going to be real weird, but then you'll talk about it later. Send it to somebody. Say, I need to talk about this week. And the reason I need to talk about it is I don't want to be who I was yesterday. And I want to make decisions today that are going to lead me into the future that God's called me into. Because what God does is he invites us into a greater story, and he leads us into the calling that he's placed on our lives. So I'm going to ask you to stand up. I'm going to pray for us, and we'll wrap up from there. Thanks so much for being here. Let me pray for us. Father, we thank you that you don't settle in where we currently are. God, that you call us into these deeper levels of understanding and being in the world. And I pray for the person who's here, as we start talking about some of this, like their categories immediately came to mind. And God, I ask that they would be brave enough and willing enough and trusting enough of you to take a step towards where you're calling them to be, and that you would surround them with people that will help them get there. But at the end of the day, they would come to you with a posture of open-handedness for their heart. And then I pray for the person who's not a follower of you, and they were here, and for about half the message, they were disagreeing with me, which I totally get, and they're still not sure about everything when it comes to you or faith or Christianity, but they're here, they're like, at least what's being said is where I am. God, I ask that they would ask the question very deeply with a real curiosity of what happens when they get to the end of whatever their rope is. And at that point, God, whatever that is, hopefully it's today, but whenever that is, that they would at least be willing to explore what it might mean to consider you. And when they choose to do that, God, I pray that they would get engaged with people either here or elsewhere who would guide them in that journey. God, we thank you for the freedom. We thank you for the love that you have for us. And we give our entire lives to you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. Thanks so much for being here. See you right back here next week. See you soon. And thank you so much for watching online. We're so glad that you decided to join us today, and we hope that you enjoyed your experience with us as well. I also want to let you know that if any of this kind of hit home with you and you're interested in taking a next step, if you're here in the Northern Michigan area, we would love to connect with you, either live here at one of our services at Render, or maybe even one of our small groups. We'd love for you to take a next step with us, get to know some people here as well. Or if you're watching somewhere else, we'd love to point you to a church in your area. So we'd love for you just to message us or comment. We'd love to get you connected with a place that can help you take some of those next steps. I also wanted you to do this. If you're not following us on social media, we'd love to invite you to do it. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are really the best places to find out more information about our church, all that's going on around here as well. Again, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you right back here next week. See you soon.